Okay, we are going to talk about the eve of the Revolution, the eve of the French Revolution. We're going to be mainly talking about Louis the 14th, also known as the Sun King, and essentially what he did to eventually cause the French Revolution. Before we get started, there are going to be questions as we go, right? You can restart it, but I'm going to try and talk slow and cover most of the stuff that's on the slide. So it should be like your normal ed puzzles in that manner. So before the French Revolution happens, France is one of the richest and most powerful countries in the world. However, they start to get themselves involved in a lot of different wars, and that is really what becomes the issue that gets them in a lot of debt. At the time, they have a absolute monarchy, right, which we kind of talked about in class earlier this week. And we've talked about the idea of absolute rule with Thomas Hobbes. The idea essentially is that they have one ruler or one king. Monarchy is a system where there's a king, and that person has all of the power. They would be at the top of what is called the social hierarchy, which you're seeing right here. And when we think of social hierarchy, just think of the pyramid that I drew in the classroom. I've drawn a few of them. One of them was for feudalism, and now this one has been for the description of the three estates, right? But when we see social hierarchy, just think of those pyramids. Those are actually called social structure pyramids. We're going to be using those a lot this year. And then finally, the overarching question that we're going to be thinking about is why might a revolution occur in a rich, powerful country where the people have neither power nor money? We're going to be talking about essentially, regardless of how well your country is doing, if people are not doing well, if your common people are not doing well, they're going to get upset. Okay. Here's Louis the 14th. His fantastic hair looks kind of like if Bob Ross put his hair down. But he actually he gets the throne at age 4 and 8 months to be exact. When we have people throughout history get the power at this early, they are king, but they're not the one that is really making all the decisions. They usually have somebody that is making those decisions for them, and that's going to be this man, Jules Cardinal Mazarin. All right. He's essentially going to take over, and he's essentially going to be the one that is taking King Louis as his pupil and bringing him along as he goes. When we think of kings, absolute monarchies, and the right to rule, we have to understand this idea of divine right. And that is in the sense that in this perspective, God in the Catholic religion is the one that is choosing for these kings and queens to have the right to rule. It's an idea that God is this is a representative of God on earth, right? So divine right is the right to rule via God in the terms of Catholicism. And what we're going to be seeing is the Enlightenment and the Protestant Reformation, which we talked about, are really going to start to challenge these ideas of where a king gets his rights. So with that being said, the Sun King is what Louis XIV really starts to call himself. This is a man that has had all the power in the world since he was 4 years old. It's certainly going to mess with your brain a little bit, and he becomes this very eccentric human. He does not agree with the whole idea of the Reformation and the idea of what we're going to be talking about as French Protestants. And he sees them as potential rebels because they're going to challenge the idea, this concept of divine right and the right to rule. So what he's going to be doing is he's going to try and convert them by force. He revokes this thing called the Edict of Nantes, which guaranteed freedom of worship in 1685. And what you're going to see, and what we talked about in this, in the concept of the rights of man and citizen, right? The Declaration of Independence. these Enlightenment ideas that you have freedom of religion and freedom of worship, something that France has had since 1685. He's going to revoke that, and essentially, it's going to be making a full a full part of his country, a whole group of the population upset with him. It would be like if our president at one point said that people from New England cannot be X, Y, and Z. Right? You're ostracizing. You're separating a large group of your country, and essentially having them be potential rebels. And what he does is he creates the potential rebel that he is so afraid of. This video down here, I'm going to try and loop in at the end, but it starts to talk a little bit about the Sun King and talk about this place called Versailles. And it's actually an interesting thing. But he essentially takes Versailles, which starts as a small palace, and builds it up into this crazy, crazy, extravagant place where he lives. And he brings all of the other political people in that area to Versailles, right? And what he's doing there is he's playing a game. He distracts these other members of the nobility with games and with all sorts of entertainment. And when he's doing that, he's able to run the country as he wishes. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that it is super expensive for the nobility to spend a large amount of time at the Palace of Versailles. And at the same time, they're also leaving their land. So they're leaving their supporters, right? So think of the idea of you've got your friend group at home. You've got, even in this class, you have groups of people that look out for you. Now, if you were to go to a new school or a new friend or a new school or a new team, I should say, it's going to be very difficult for you to have the support of your friends or your former teammates because you're not close to them, right? And that's working in a world in 2020 where we have cell phones, where we have social media, where we have all sorts of lines of communication. But now we're thinking back into the early days of society, and we're going to be talking about leaving your support group, leaving the peasants that work on your farm and pay your taxes, the people that protect you, and then you are now under the eye of the Sun King. All of this is strategic, and Louis XIV is really going to do a good job in controlling his country for quite some time by keeping his thumb pressed and keeping people underneath his thumb in the sense of political reasoning and also financial reasoning. So he adopts this emblem. Essentially, what Louis is saying, and there's two questions here. Why do you think Louis XIV adopted the sun as his emblem, and what does the sun represent? If we were in class, we'd probably have a discussion about this, but instead, I'd just like to talk to you about it. Essentially, he's adopting this because the sun is the center of our universe. And Louis XIV thinks that he is not only the center of France, but he is the center of his own universe. And the sun has all this power, right? Historically and even scientifically, we know now that the sun represents power. And he is saying that he's the Sun King. Louis XIV is the center of society. This is the center of France. This is the center, oh boy, I'm messing up that. The center of society at the time. And it's important that he is represented in that way and in that manner. And that's why he adopts the emblem in his sense. We see him on the right here, a depiction of him in one of his very extravagant outfits. Louis is going to be known, and you can see in some of the videos that we're going to show, you can see this extravagance in what he wears and what he does. He associates himself with Apollo, and you're going to see a lot of him looking back to the classics like you did in the Enlightenment when it comes to ancient Greece and ancient Rome. He's going to be flamboyant. He's going to be a person that shows off. And then again, we're going to be talking about that magnificent court and palace of the Palace of Versailles. So I'm going to try to open this link here and see if this connects. I don't believe it does. But what you can see here, and I'll attach the videos in Google Classroom. But what you can see here is essentially the extravagance of Versailles, right? This is the grand hallway of mirrors, and you see how much money, how much intricacy was put into these different parts of the palace. This is just one room, right? So you're really going to see how much money he puts into this. And then at the same time, as we have become to know, he's bankrupting the country and his own individual people. As you see here, the gardens in the outside of the palace, this is actually modern day. They still have kept up the gardens. You see that his people are struggling and he is out there spending money like it's no one's business. And it's really all to take care of himself. Excuse me. So just a reminder, Louis on the right here, he does eventually get a little chubby, right, from his lifestyle. And this is his wife on the left, Marie Antoinette, who is famous, or infamous, I should say, for saying, let them eat cake. When asked about how much bread is cost and how that affects the people, she responded, let them eat cake. However, we know now, as history has gone, that is a myth. But essentially the lesson there stands that we are seeing a great disparity between how much people in the upper class, the 1%, are really living this lavish lifestyle, and how at the other end, there's people in the country that are starving and paying 100% of the taxes and not doing well. And really, all of this is going to lead up to us essentially changing the world with the French Revolution. It is going to be one of the more significant revolutions, and it's really going to, as Americans and going through U.S. history, we always learn about how important the U.S. Revolution was to other countries. However, the French Revolution cannot be understated, and how important it is to society and to other countries getting their own independence. Lastly, the king's using these taxes, right, for his army, to pay public officials, and for the luxurious lifestyle that the royal family led. And this is the Palace of Versailles again at the bottom, right? Look at how large it is. Look at how intricate it is. Look at how many people it must have taken. This is the Sun King's bedroom, and you'll see it in some of the videos, but it's so incredible that noble people are actually begging to hold the candle while the Sun King changes and gets ready for bed or awakens in the morning. And it's a little weird. It's a little weird, right? All the different things that are going on, but it really is to show the power and the abuse of that power that the Sun King had. So hopefully we were able to answer the questions in the Ed puzzle, and hopefully this was pretty smooth for you guys. I'd like to do some of these PowerPoints, these short ones, for you more often in the future. Please let me know if you have any questions.